the greatest and amazing forgiveness of God. When you know God has forgiven you, that's wealth you cannot even put any money on it. And then we talked about how God selected a beautiful field and planted a garden and, put everything that the plants will need, the vineyard of God. And we were told that for you are people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people. A wealth we cannot imagine is the feeling of God's chosen. You and I. Can't put a price on that. Because God chose to build that beautiful garden. His presence is with us. His protection, His grace, His friendship, and everything we can imagine. You can't put any money value on that. A wealth you cannot imagine. And then last Sunday, we heard about the healing of this woman who had been carrying this illness. They said the devil has put some illness on her for over 18 years. And one day, at the synagogue, God saw him, Jesus saw him and said, come. And the idea that Jesus sees us, the idea that Jesus will call us back to come and build relationship with us. The idea that it might take 10 years, 18 years, knowing that one day Jesus will call you. And then you just roll that burden of your back, the relief that you receive, the healing is wealth you and I cannot imagine. So what are we going to say today? Wealth you cannot imagine. I'm going to let two powerful and famous hymn writers tell us about that wealth. The first person that you will hear from, her name is Julia Harriet Johnston, born in 1849 in Salineville, Ohio. And the other one is called John Newton, born in 1725, England. These two powerful hymn writers are going to tell us that wealth. They're going to give us that sense of wealth we cannot imagine. So Julia was a daughter of a Presbyterian minister, a woman of deep conviction. John Newton, he had a troubled life. His early life was marked with rebellion and disdain of authority. See, two polarized personalities. Julia's life was a tapestry of service stitched together by faith and purpose. She was a Sunday school teacher for 40 years, a leader of the Presbyterian Missionary Society in Peoria, and the author of about 500 books. What about John? John Newton's life was filled with moral decay, spiritual blindness. He was a man lost in the depth of sin, seemingly beyond redemption. He joined the British Navy, but his insubordination led to his desertion, and eventually he was involved in the the slave trade. On the other hand, Julia Johnston, her society was filled with decay. That good, loving woman had to live during a time when women were discouraged from teaching, preaching in a mixed gathering, but Julia didn't let that stop her. She used her poetry, writing music, as her pulpit. She preached through melody, she taught through verses, she evangelized through songs. Turn to your hymn 365. And Julia will tell you the wealth you and I cannot imagine. 365. Let's sing the first verse. She will not let her society stop her. She used hymns as her pulpit and evangelized. What about John Newton? I'm telling you of two personalities. John Newton's involvement in the slave trade was a dark and troubling chapter of his life. Newton worked on slave ships, where he participated in the capture and transportation of enslaved Africans. He was involved in the inhumane and brutal treatment of enslaved people, contributing to their suffering and their exploitation. Newton's role in the slave trade included overseeing the loading and unloading of enslaved individuals, managing the ship crew, and ensuring that enslaved people were kept in horrific conditions during the voyage. The conditions on these ships were appalling, with enslaved people packed tightly together, often chained, and subjected to disease, malnutrition, abuse, and death. And what was Julia doing? Julia's music, her writing, echoed the Apostle Paul's assurance. Paul said that no matter how deep the stain of sin, God's grace runs deeper. This hymn is not just a sentimental fluff. It speaks of justification and redemption and the power of the cross. John Newton. One day, John Newton was on board the ship Greyhound, which was caught in a violent storm in the North Atlantic Ocean. The storm was so severe that it threatened to sink the ship. Newton, who had lived a life of moral decay, spiritual blindness, found himself in a state of utter despair. As the ship was battering the waves, Newton cried out to God and said, Lord, have mercy. Have mercy. This cry of mercy marked the beginning of Newton's spiritual awakening. In that moment of surrender, Newton experienced profound sense of his own sinfulness, and that he felt God's grace. Newton's heart was softened, and he felt a deep conviction of his sin. As Newton's faith deepened, you know what he did? He went to school, went to seminary, became a pastor. His newfound faith led him to seek a life of righteousness and service. He became an ordained minister and served as a pastor for many years, preaching about the theme of grace, redemption, and transformative power of God.